Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And today we have special guest. We have Tyler Zell here from The Standard, and Tyler represents The Standard's Disability Insurance Division for the Worksite. And since we've been developing such a close relationship with The Standard since Allstate Benefits was acquired and that transition has been underway, I think one of the big things we've been really excited about is this gives us, newer, closer access to the Standard's disability portfolio, which, as many of you probably know, if you knew the Standard beforehand, very, very reputable. We get a lot of smiles when we talk about the Standard and when we talked about that transition, and the disability program was largely why. So whether you're relatively familiar, not familiar at all, or an expert, I am sure Tyler is going to give us a wonderful overview that will make you feel very well equipped to offer this in any of your meetings groups. So Tyler, thank you very much for taking the time to be here today and your partnership kind of in the early stages of getting to know each other. And you can take it right away whenever you're ready.
Hey, really appreciate it, Jason, and thanks for your guys' time today. We're really going to be covering group disability basics here. We'll talk about short term a little bit, but mostly long term disability, kind of how to educate your clients from an individual perspective, and then those prospective business owners you have out there too, wanting to offer coverage to their employees and making sure they just have a well-rounded understanding of why we offer disability insurance and the different ways we can really purchase it. So with that, I'm going to jump into the presentation here. Share my screen. There. See my screen okay, Jason?
We got you.
Awesome.
And feel free to ask any questions for Tyler in the chat. I'll make sure they get answered.
Yes, please ask as many questions as you want. I'll stop at any point, because I want to make sure that you guys get all your questions answered out there when you're talking to people. So again, this is long-term disability basics, and my name's Tyler Zell. As Jason said, I'm with the Standard. Been an employee benefits representative for 12 years with the company, and yeah, we're known as a disability carrier in the industry. We've done it since 1908 was when we sold our first insurance policy. We're based out of Portland, Oregon. So thank you again for your time today, guys. So with that being said, what is disability insurance? At its highest level, disability insurance is insuring your paycheck. If you were to get sick or go out of work because of an accident, this is going to put money back into your pocket to really pay for all those bills while you're experiencing that hardship of life. So it's a very important insurance product because when you look at the hierarchy of risk, medical insurance is probably number one at the top. Can't afford not to have it. Disability would probably be number two. If you were, a 30 to 40-year-old in your working years and an unforeseen event were to happen to you, how would you make sure that you were going to be able to pay for all those expenses you have until you're going to get to a retirement age where a lot more social programs are available to you? So there's only a couple ways you can really get disability insurance. The individual market's one of them. If you go and apply for individual insurance, they are gonna ask for financial background, financial statements from you. And then there's going to be some medical underwriting elements as well because they want to make sure that, you're healthy if they're going to issue a policy. And then those premiums, based on how much money you make and how much coverage you buy, can be relatively costly. So, we're going to mostly talk about group insurance today, which is a more economical way to purchase disability insurance. As you can see from the stat on the screen right here, 87% percent of employees that get disability insurance get it from their employer. So it's probably it is the largest means to purchase coverage in the United States. So we're going to just go over plan designs and all hopefully encompass everything you need to know about disability when you're talking to your clients. Unlike individual insurance, group disability insurance is most of the time guarantee issue, meaning it's not going to ask you any medical questions when you're applying for coverage. And really, because of the economies of scale you get when you're bringing multiple people onto a plan at one time, the insurance carriers are more willing to take that risk of giving you guarantee issue insurance knowing that we have large enough numbers to hopefully cover the spread. So if someone was to go out on claim, basically the rest of the group, we're collecting enough premium as an insurance carrier to make sure we're financially stable too. So, with that being said, we'll jump in the presentation. So, these are all the elements we're going to cover today. Who's eligible for coverage? Very important when you're defining a disability plan to make sure that you know who's going to be on your group disability contract. The benefit waiting period. So, how long do you have to wait before benefits actually kick in on a plan? Maximum benefits. There are going to be caps under group disability plans where we're only going to insure up to a certain monthly maximum that we're going to go over. Premium contributions. Very important to understand who's paying for the coverage and how that affects the coverage if something were to happen and you were to go out on claim. Defining pre-disability earnings. What's actually covered and what's the definition of earnings under a contract? It's very important to understand what a group LTD policy is covering and what it's not covering, because when you're educating employees, if something were to happen to them, we want to make sure that they understand exactly how much income they're actually going to get out when they are get from the plan while they're out on claim. Maximum benefit periods. There's different maximums on how long the policy will pay you for, and we're going to go over some of those. And then finally, limitations on a contract. Very important to understand that there are limitations under a group LTD contract. Just to know that certain disabilities are only going to be covered for a certain amount of time, and just important to the plan and education for employees as well. So with that being said, who's covered? So traditionally on a group LTD plan, there's going to be a member definition, and that member definition is going to say, hey, if you are this, you are covered under this policy. Most employers offer the coverage to all employees, but disability can be discriminatory. A little bit different than health insurance or dental and vision insurance. You can have carve-outs on long-term disability plans. So if there's a larger employer that only wants to cover a sub-segment of employees, maybe they're C-suite executives, they can do that. So very important to note like who you want covered under the plan, but generally speaking, we would like all employees covered under the plan, at least to some degree. The larger number of employees you have, the more generous the offer oftentimes is under a group LTD plan. You must be a US citizen or Canadian citizen to qualify for an LTD plan. If you have a population that is not employee or an employee in the US or Canada, you want to make sure you let the carrier know that because oftentimes there are going to be some limitations on how many people we can cover if you're residing outside of the country. The member definition does not include. We don't like temporary or seasonal employees. We experience adverse risks if we know employees are only going to be under a contract for a certain amount of time. The likelihood of filing a claim because you know you're a seasonal employee, oftentimes from an actuarial perspective, the claim incidence is higher in those scenarios. Full-time member of the armed service. So if you are an armed service member, you will not be covered under the policy until you come back and you work a full-time job as a normal member again. And then leased or independent contractors, no 1099 employees. This is really strictly for your W-2 employees at your employer. And then how do people come eligible? They complete an eligibility waiting period. Most employers, it's first of the month following 30 days of hire, but that can be extended or shortened depending on what the group's trying to achieve. And then you have to meet the active at work requirement. The active at work requirement is just on the policy effective date. We assume you are working for the employer. If you are out from a disability and come back to work, you have to satisfy at least one full day of work before you will be covered under a group LTD plan. Any questions so far, guys? That all makes sense to everyone?
Yeah, I think that all makes sense for me.
Cool.
20 hours a week actively at work, is that at all flexible or something that
Yeah.
could change based on underwriting, what the group determines as benefit eligible, and so on?
Yep. Correct, Jason. Our most common you're going to see is 30-hour work weeks, and that's just because it aligns with the ACA. But we see 40-hour work weeks from time to time, and then we do see lower than 20-hour work weeks from time to time in that 10 to 15-hour range. All things that just need to be cleared with underwriting. So the more transparent you are with us, the more transparent we are with our underwriters, and they make sure that we 100% everyone knows who's going to be covered under the plan.
Perfect.
So, sorry. Let me exit out really quick here. Okay. Benefit waiting periods. Sorry, my bar is blocking part of the screen on here. So benefit waiting periods. This is the time period that a member has to be out on disability before the benefits actually kick in and pay you. Under a long-term disability plan, as a reminder, the benefits are paid monthly. So oftentimes the days associated with it kind of look like they're in months, right? Your most common benefit waiting periods are going to be 90 or 180 day waits. Um, and what you'll see a lot of times in California, because the state of California has a short-term disability process that we all pay into through the state, is sometimes you will extend the benefit waiting periods even to 365 days, because we know for the most part, for that first year, people have a state insurance product, disability product that we're paying into via our taxes. So if you're in a state that does not have uh, state disability insurance, then you can put a short-term disability product in front of a long-term disability product. Um, Generally speaking, on a short-term disability product, the wait's going to be about 7 days, 14 days, depending on the price point of what the customer is trying to achieve, and really what their sick leave looks like too, or vacation time, because you kind of want to integrate all of your practices together when you're thinking about an employee going out on claim. If you're pretty generous with how much vacation time you allow employee, maybe you can make that waiting period a little bit longer because you know that that vacation pay is going to be able to supplement their income until they roll over onto a long-term disability plan. So obviously, the shorter the waiting period, the more expensive the cost. The 30-day wait periods tend to be a little less popular in California, but we can do a 30-day wait. 90 is kind of that sweet spot that is the most commonly sold in the industry, at least.
Yeah, and you can feel free to speak nationally. Everybody
Yeah.
on this call is from all over the country. Obviously, California has a lot of special cases, though, like you said, with the structure. I'm interested just in this, recent work culture of unlimited PTO. How do you guys handle those scenarios?
Yeah, so on a group disability product, when you get to the actual when you jump into your on claim and you're getting payments, we integrate the two together, but not to exceed 100% of your income. So we're going to go over benefit maximum percentages a little bit in this presentation too. What we really you're going to see 60% is kind of the most common percentage as a maximum the insurance carrier wants to give an employee. And really, the reason for that is it's the perfect amount of money to get someone by and keeping them paying their bills, but not too much money where maybe there's a lack of incentive to go back to work. So, really, when you look at PTO banks and things of that nature, we're going to integrate those benefits together. And these are all things we want to know on the front end, right? When we're
Sure.
insuring a member, we don't want them to have necessarily too much income. And there are points in the contract that if you're still receiving PTO pay, that it becomes deductible income. So traditionally, that's after the first 12 months or 24 months of being on claim.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Helpful. Thank you.
no problem at all. So, benefit percentages and maximums. Like I said, what you're traditionally going to see in the market at that income replacement ratio is 60% or 66 and two-thirds. And the reason for that is there's going to be a bar graph I'm going to show you right after that is it's the perfect level of incentive where we see people able to stay out on claim if they're not able to get back to work, but have enough financial security where they're not having to rush themselves back to work like you'll see in the bar graph. There's always a maximum on the plan. Traditionally speaking, it really depends on what the group looks like. Most plans we sell have a 10K maximum, but for your industries like maybe law firms or doctor groups, you're oftentimes going to see higher maximums because people make more money at those types of organizations. So, just important to look at your clients' incomes and make sure that we're getting them as close to that 60% level as possible. And then also important to look on a group disability policy if individual disability policies are an offset. Most policies do not offset for individual disability, meaning that if you have an individual policy and you have a group policy, they will both pay you congruently. But some policies do offset on the group space. So you just want to make sure when you're looking at contracts and you're working with carrier partners that they're not offsetting for individual policies if you're working with a client that that has those type of insurance products. So, and then again, the maximums, the larger the group, traditionally the higher maximum the carrier is going to be willing to offer you. And then it's really going to depend on those incomes as well. If you have a lot of high wage earners, then traditionally speaking, we're going to try to get them more coverage if available. So income replacement chart, as you see on the left, that is how fast someone is getting back to work over a 6 month period, or what percentage of people are getting back to work over a 6 month period. And then on the bottom axis, you're seeing the actual income replacement ratio. So as you can see, if someone was receiving out on claim less than 25% of their income, they're going to get back to work a lot faster because they financially don't have a choice. Adversely, as you can see, if someone's making more than their take-home income, so if they're making 151% of their income while out on disability claim, they're going to be a lot less incentivized to come back to work. Um, the, the reason why any people even come back to work in that they're making 150% of their income oftentimes is those type A personalities, or those years where if you were to get back to work and working, you can make more income by being at work than what your past has indicated. Things like sales positions, or maybe you're a partner at an attorney firm, or you own a medical practice. Engineering firms, those type of individuals tend to be motivated to get back to work even if they're receiving a healthy individual or disability income replacement. So premium contributions. I think the biggest thing to note regarding premium contributions is you're paying for disability insurance, and if you're paying taxes on that premium, then you don't have to pay tax when you're on claim. If you're not paying taxes on the premium, then when you go out on claim, the IRS still wants you to pay them. That being said, most of the policies we run are what's called non-contributory plans, meaning the employer is going to pay 100% of the coverage. There are some individuals that receive a tax-free benefit still, even under a non-contributory plan. Those individuals are business owners. So if you are a sole proprietor, partnership, LLC, S Corp, and you own more than 2% of the S Corp, then even if you were to file on claim, the government looks at that as you paid for the benefit with business profits. So benefits would be non-taxable to you as an individual. So it's important to note that any W-2 employees that are not an owner would receive a taxable benefit. So again, that take-home income is going to be a little bit more, so or a little bit less. So a little bit of an education process. Contributory coverage means, excuse me, that part of the plan is being paid by the employer and part of the plan is being paid by the group. A little bit less common in the disability space. Part of the reason is the affordability of the coverage. Um, but we do see it time to time. If an employer wants to pay for a certain portion of that, and then the employee has to pay for that other portion, the degree of taxability is going to be based on how much the employee is paying versus how much the employer is paying. It's a little bit more complicated when you're preparing your taxes, when you have this kind of arrangement, but most of the insurance carriers prepare all that for the people out that are out on claims. In our contract specifically, we cover the FICA expenses on the employer's behalf, and then we also prepare the W-2s on the employee's behalf. So a lot of that risk or liability is taken off the actual group itself. And then voluntary coverage is just when you're offering the coverage to the group and it's employee dollars paying for it. Also very common in the industry. We do have participation requirements when you are offering voluntary coverage, just because of the guarantee issue of the group LTD plan, as well as just the risk associated with we know we're going to get some unhealthy people on the plan, and then we're obviously going to get some healthy people as well. Traditionally speaking, participation requirements is 25% on an LTD plan. That can be flexible based on the enrollment strategy and group you're working with, though. So important to communicate enrollment strategy to your carrier partners because they will take a bigger risk for you oftentimes if you have a better enrollment strategy. And then finally, gross up plans. Maybe the least common plan you'd see in the industry, but the most generous. What a gross up plan is where the employer's paying 100% of the premiums, but they're adding the premiums back to the employee's wages and payroll deducting them. It basically makes it look like the employees are paying for the coverage while the employer is actually paying for the coverage, thus resulting in them getting a tax-free benefit if they were to go and file a claim. So, while not very popular, definitely the most generous of the offerings. Earnings definition. So, what's included in your earnings? On a base contract, your monthly rate of earnings, basically what do you take home in a month? Base wages. Any shift differential pay, if you have differential pay, you want to make sure it's covered under the carrier partner's contract that you're working with. Commissions. If you want commissions covered, make sure you let your carrier know. But in our base definition, we do cover these. And then we average them over the last 12, 24, or 36 months, whatever makes the most sense for us and the client themselves. Bonuses may be included in an earnings definition, not as common. It's just important if you want the incomes covered when you're quoting out with a carrier partner, make sure you have all of the incomes on there. Other thing for business owners, you don't see K1 on here, but K1 earnings are covered if you're a business owner. So any earnings they receive from the business itself, if they want covered under the group LTD policy, it needs to be communicated to the carrier so we're billing you guys appropriately for those earnings. And then other options. You can use W-2 earnings if you're trying to quote something out. W-2 is a great reflection of what someone's going to make over the next year. And then target earnings not as important. Um, Important tip, I think I discussed this at claim time. Make sure on the front end you're reporting those early earnings accurately because it will affect your claim if you were to go on disability and have to use the coverage. Maximum benefit period. So how long do you get paid? Under a traditional, or I guess let's back up a step. The industry used to be paid if you were to file a claim, the disability carrier, if you were to stay on claim, they'd pay you to age 65. That's not gone away, but less common these days as people are working later into their careers. What you'll see most commonly is Social Security normal retirement age is what a disability carrier will pay you to. So if you do see contracts, older contracts, you might see that age 65. Important to make sure you're updating those to Social Security normal retirement age to make sure those younger folks are taken care of if something were to happen to them. There are shorter durations for maximum benefit periods that are more affordable. So you can quote a long-term disability plan with a 2-year benefit or a 5-year benefit. Again, just not as common, mostly because the price point is, while it does save you money, it doesn't really take care of you if there is that catastrophic risk or accident that's going to keep you out on claim for a long benefit duration. So, we tend not to sell as many of these policies, but they do exist out there. And if you're working with a client that it needs to be more budget friendly with, this is a great option. Try to reduce those premiums. On to the next one.
Yeah, Tyler, real quick,
Yeah,
is there any flexibility in that benefit period? Is there a benefit period set ahead of time? Or I know some people maybe project out retiring at age 65, but due to one change or another, they realize they can take their Social Security at age 62, for example. Do you see any sort of flexibility of coverage there, or do they just generally terminate the coverage at that point?
Yeah, so generally speaking, even if you were an older individual and you were to get disabled past that retirement age, there's a limited schedule of benefits under a contract that's still going to pay you an income even if you're past retirement age. The duration's not as long. It goes from anything from 2 years to about a year, depending on your actual age. But most commonly, you're going to see the Social Security normal retirement age out there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's just by and large the most common.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I didn't mention this too, but important to note when you're working with small business owners, a lot of times they're opting out of workers' comp. So if they were to get injured on the job, they don't have coverage, and as a business owner, that's their prerogative. Long-term disability plans are 24-hour coverage. So even if a business owner is opting out of workers' comp, this plan would pay you if you were to injure yourself on the job as well. So just want to make sure I mentioned that because a lot of small business owners, my dad owns a small construction company. He does not participate in his own
Oh,
workers'
sorry about that. Running you over there.
Disability benefits that may be limited to pay. Important to know the limitations in every contract, just because full transparency, we want everyone that is insured under a policy to also understand how long and if they get benefits and how long they get them if they do. So if you're not under the care of a physician, there's going to be a limitation for that because obviously we want you to be seeing a doctor if you're out on disability claim, making sure you're doing all the things the doctor says you need to do in order to get better. If you're not participating in rehab plans, oftentimes carrier contracts will say it's mandatory that you do participate in a rehab plan. That can vary among contracts, so make sure you know. If you're able to work but choose not to, the disability carrier is not going to pay you just to be out at home on claim if you don't like your job. Um, if you're confined or jailed, or if your disability as a result of a crime, the insurance carrier is probably going to deny that claim. And then payments are limited if you're living outside of the US or Canada. It's called a foreign residency limitation. It used to be more so because for the carrier partners, it's hard if you live in a different country for us to send you a check. That's not as much the reason as, you can if you live in the United States, we are a country that, we're towards the top of the world in income. Uh, so if you were to go and maybe to a third world country with a 60% income replacement, but it reduced your cost of living by 50%, then the insurance carrier doesn't see that as a lot of incentive to go back to work in those scenarios as well. So requesting an RFP. So how do you actually get a quote for disability from the standard or any carrier for that matter? So here's some things that we love to know when we're quoting a prospective client for you. The group's legal name, the headquarters of the group, what type of organization is it? Is it C Corp, S Corp, LLC, partnership? Affects the taxability of benefits that we discussed a little bit earlier. Website if it's available. Is the coverage already in force or is it virgin? If the coverage is in force, we would love to see a contract at a bare minimum, a benefit summary so we can get the plan designs right. But if you give us full contract, we can tell you exactly what's going to be different about what we're offering versus what they have in force and areas that you might want to improve or areas that you might want to create less incentive for someone to go and claim. A census with demographic info. So that's going to include genders, ages, zip codes, job titles, and then salaries. Very important to have job titles and salaries. Other employee benefit products don't require those two things, but from a risk perspective for disability, something that we need to know. What effective date of coverage you want? Always important because that date that coverage starts is the date that after, as long as you're actively at work, you can file a claim if something were to happen to you. And then your desired commission level. Most plans we see in the industry are going to be anywhere from 5 to 20% commissions, with 10 to 15 being the most common. The larger the group is, probably the less the commission schedule is going to be between you and the client. But we can quote anything you'd want within reason for those commission levels. And then we do utilize an RFP inbox at the standard. So you can send your RFPs to larfp@standard.com. If you send the commission levels, everything that I've outlined right here, and if you're not in the state of California, we will route you to your correct office to make sure that you can get a quote from your local representative. So group requirements, we actually do offer guarantee issue coverage for group sizes 2 employees and above. There are some stipulations when the group is only 2 to 10 employees. It goes to our small group product that we call Agility. It does have some limitations under it, but it is still guarantee issue coverage and very good coverage. For groups larger than 10 employees, if you want to offer the plan on a voluntary basis, we do need at least 10 people to enroll in a voluntary plan. We would like at least 20% of the total eligible population to enroll. If you don't hit 20%, but you get at least 10 employees, it becomes a conversation with the insurance carrier's underwriter and the insurance sales rep. So basically, we negotiate on the behalf of you and the group to see if underwriting is going to be willing to take that participation. Expats. So if you do have people residing outside of the United States but are United States citizens, make sure to include to let the insurance company know because of those foreign residency limitations that I was talking about earlier. And then, yeah, a general good rule of thumb is if you have a foreign population of employees, if less than 10% are in a different country, usually the insurance carrier is going to be okay with that risk. And I think that's all I had for presentation, guys. We got through it pretty fast. This is just a slide if you're not familiar with the standard, the background of who we are. We've been in business since 1906. Our financial ratings are A across the board. 87% of our revenue prior to our Allstate acquisition came from life and disability exclusively. So this is an industry that we very much believe in, and if we aren't successful selling life and disability, we're probably not going to be financially successful as a company. So, are there any questions you got?
Yeah, Wendy asked about, so Wendy, you may have to unmute and just ask for a little bit of uh flavor here. She's
Yeah,
asking about the average claim approval experience.
yeah. We
So
get it all the time with the carriers on the long-term care side. So I'm wondering on this is so much longer. You've
Yeah.
had this in place so long. So just curious.
Yeah, so I mean, I got asked this question 2 weeks ago in a finalist presentation is the funny part. We're in business of paying claims.
Yeah.
Our claim approval rates high 90s, I would
Okay.
say 99%.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so when a claim submitted to us, just so you have an idea of the experience when you file a claim, there's going to be an employer statement where the employer says like, "Hey, this was their last day of work. This is how much they made, and here's some other details." There's going to be a physician statement, and then there's going to be an employee statement. Once we get those three statements back, then a claims examiner is going to be able to adjudicate a claim. Because of the runway you have with long-term disability, you have traditionally speaking 90 days to review these details and approve or deny a claim. I guess this brings up a more important point, is traditionally a long-term disability policy does have a pre-ex limitation on it. So pre-existing condition
Uh-huh.
exclusion. What it says is from the effective date of your coverage, and this is traditionally what our pre-ex looks like. We're going to look back 3 months. If you've sought medical attention for gone to a doctor, gone to a hospital, taken prescription drugs for anything, we're going to exclude that from disability coverage for the first year of the contract. After
Okay.
that first year, you're covered. Doesn't matter if you've had prior health issues, you're covered with no questions asked after a year. And if you're taking over a carrier's contract, we grandfather that time. So you're never
Okay.
going to have to serve a pre-ex twice.
oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. That's great.
So 312 pre-X, that's good to know.
Traditionally speaking, yeah.
Um,
Thanks.
No problem at all.
Tyler, anything you can tell us on waiver of premium? Is that built in when on
Yeah,
disability?
so disabilities waiver premium is a little bit easier than life insurance. When you go out on disability claim and approved, your premium is waived.
Good deal.
So the employer no longer has to worry about making sure to pay premiums on your behalf as the employee. Once you file that claim, you're on waiver of premium.
Good deal. Awesome.
Yeah.
And I know you had a couple of interesting riders that we were discussing the other day
Oh, yeah.
that have potential benefit increases based on ADL dependency, which many on this call are really, really familiar with.
Yeah.
Um, in what cases would you recommend adding those riders? And I have my notes here. If you can't perform two of six ADLs, you could potentially have an extended benefit period of coverage or have an increase in the total amount of coverage for ADL dependency. When would you recommend looking at those riders, especially if we're doing, a long-term care enrollment alongside, which many folks will probably be in that situation.
They pair so well together
They do.
there that if you're having that conversation about long-term care and what ADLs and the inability to do those look like, I don't know why you wouldn't throw them on your disability policy.
Sure.
The cost increase is so minimal to add those two riders. We're talking anywhere from both riders about a 5 to 15% increase in the total cost. That when you run those numbers and you find out I have a 20 employee company and I can insure everyone with those riders for maybe 400 or 500 bucks a month. It's a pretty powerful story, and what you're giving your employees is the absolute best coverage you can find on the market.
That's pretty fantastic. And that's one of the things I've just learned diving into more of your products. The riders are high value for, relatively low cost if you're somebody who nerds out on the cost value like we do.
100%. And we're all consultants here, right? We're trying to educate employees, we're trying to educate employers. We're just trying to make sure that they're giving the best information and the best coverage to their employees as possible, while knowing, there is a price point they have to work within. In order to be the best consultant and let them know what's out there, man, some of these riders, if something were to actually happen to you and you're on a disability policy, you want to make sure you have the best coverage for the unforeseen circumstances, and that's why we purchased the coverage.
100%.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I definitely just have to shout out how well disability really complements long-term care and vice versa. And I would say when we're educating employees on long-term care coverage, we get questions about, tell me why I should be looking at this when I already have a disability plan. And of course, the
Mhm.
easiest way to educate somebody on that is disability is going to replace your income, but it's, kind of your choice whether that goes to paying for the professional care, right? And long-term care is earmarked primarily for paying that professional care so it doesn't eat into your replaced income,
Yep.
right? Best way I
And
could put it. And
N-
go ahead.
knowing the risk of the two products, right?
Right.
Long-term care. Hey, when I'm at an age where I'm in time of need and I'm, depending on state, can I afford a $15,000 a month bill to be in a assisted living facility? Similar to disability, it's, hey, if I'm not at work, can I afford, with the savings I have on hand, to ride to retirement age? Often the time, the answer to both of those questions is no, and that's why people need to consider the coverage.
Right. 100%. Yeah, lots of overlap there. And the more kind of products we start to add to the group portfolio, you realize a lot of them have fantastic overlap with each other. So especially if you're speaking with new fledgling companies, the opportunity to do a benefits build out of this type with disability, long-term care, accident, critical illness, things like that, with the standard a very strong offering across all these product types. So we'll continue to help you dive in more to understand that. Um, Wendy, I'm just going to call you out here. Tyler is right here in front of you, and you have an unmute button. So I would just ask your questions out loud to Tyler. That'll help everybody learn.
Well, I apologize, because I had to hop on a call, so I might have missed this. Because we get a lot on the long-term care side. So, is there a rate guarantee on the LTDI? And if so, how long is it?
Very good question. Traditionally speaking, it's 3-year rate guarantee.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how is that based?
So it's based on like our actuarial pricing, right? So we our actuaries set a book rate, and then we as sales representatives give you a certain rate that we try to keep close to the book rate if we can. And then based on the demographics of your group, that may change over time, right? So you have a 3-year rate guarantee, but if you're traditionally hiring younger people to replace older people, oftentimes that book rate can get lowered. So sometimes, depending on the demographics, which will actually give you a rate decrease if we see that you're hiring only young people and you have an aging population that's aging off the plan. On the adverse, if you hire, a lot of older people and you're not replacing them with younger people, then it might go the opposite way where we're going to increase the price after that 3-year rate guarantee, knowing that, if someone's 50 to 60 years old, their likelihood of getting disabled is a lot higher than a 20 to 30-year-old.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. But to your point, the more you can pair products with each other between life insurance, long-term care, disability, the more insurance company has in revenue, the more negotiable they often are with things like rate guarantees and rate increases.
Yeah, and I know we've been talking about the cross sell a little bit. Are there any sort of benefits in offering long-term care and long-term disability specifically together that you guys offer?
Yeah, so again, traditionally speaking, we're going to give you a discount off the long-term disability if you also sell long-term care alongside of it. There's an 8% discount off our rates, but we try to be as negotiable as possible. Sometimes we'll even get that discount to 10, 15, 20% if it makes sense.
Awesome. I guess last thing I would uh I would ask you about personally is um any interesting case studies or in your mind, either from the standards underwriting perspective or just your personal, I like working with these types of groups. Any sort of ideal industries outside of maybe the painfully obvious ones that you like working with
You know
or
what?
don't?
I was going to say there's not an industry that we probably won't give our price for. There's a few that are high alert where we're very skeptical. Rehab centers tend not to be a great risk for us when we're
Sure.
looking at coverage. They hire a lot of, previously addicts and things of that nature when they're working at the facilities. But when it comes to target groups and groups we like, I mean, I have an attorney firm on my desk right now, and I got a construction firm, and both of them they have the same need at the end of the day. Now, is it a little bit easier of a conversation with that attorney firm since they're heavy in contract language? They understand and they're marketed to about disability at a very young age. Yeah, but the education process is no different than the construction firm. It just depends on what the needs are of the actual individual. And I think any business owner, regardless of what the industry is, or anyone that has a paycheck, if something were to happen to them, they want to be paid when they go out. I think oftentimes the more affluent people just understand that a little bit more, and that might be because they're marketed to a little bit more. But the other thing that's great about group disability insurance is that business owner, if it is a business owner or there is a C-suite of executives that make this decision, is they're not only providing coverage to themselves oftentimes, but they're making sure all their employees are taken care of. Because at the end of the day, they really want to recruit and attract people, make sure that they're happy and staying there. And a disability plan just really rounds out that portfolio.
100%. Awesome. And one of the things I've noticed because we work with a number of dentist's office or,
Yep.
dental associations is that it can be pretty hard to find disability for dentists.
Oh,
And
the doctors and dentists are the abusers of the industry, unfortunately. But guarantee issue coverage still from the group side. I know that getting them individual insurance is oftentimes a lot harder, and they make a lot of money. So a group policy is a great and economic way to get them coverage.
yeah, and just, in the limited but growing experience we have with some of your products, one of the interesting case studies that we found was on the short-term disability. Um, that the pregnancy benefit came in handy with a sale to one of our groups because it was um, a group of practicing dentists, right? And it was a really nice sort of marketable angle to be able to take that you don't have to choose, you know, starting a business with starting a family,
Yeah.
managing your practice with starting a family. So that was really nice.
We always
Um,
say pregnancy is the only disability that you ever get happy about.
that's right. Let's see, but still an
Uh,
expensive one.
Yeah, of course.
I have a question that came to me. Tyler, hi.
How's it going, Gretchen?
Pretty good.
Good.
I think you answered this, but we had a few people come in a little bit late. Does where the insured is living have an impact on the claim payment?
On the claim payment itself, it doesn't.
Okay.
When it comes to the actual risk, it does, though. There are states that tend to be more healthy than other states, and you will see that in the rating function. And that's why we ask for zip codes when we're quoting out a group.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Good to
Good
know.
question, though.
Thank you. Mhm.
Except if they're living outside of the US and Canada, as far as claims
Correct.
payment, there is some limitation there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
We don't
so
we don't want you to move to the Philippines and us pay your paycheck and you
Yeah.
live like a king or queen.
yes.
Yeah.
So we had questions about specific groups. So one was about hair salons,
Mhm.
and the other we had how about an entire city of employees? So I guess that would mean all municipal employees. Are you familiar with cases like
I will
that?
tell you that the Standard probably does more public sector business than any other carrier out there.
Came to the right
Um,
place.
so I was at City this week and I was at one last week. Um, yes, cities tend to be very popular purchaser of insurance from an employer paid or voluntary basis.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else have any questions for Tyler while we have him here? He's a fantastic resource. And if you have cases in mind, of course, you can come to us. We're happy to start an introduction and help you with your case. But I think a lot of these things, given what needs to be dialed in for every case, as long as you're submitting the correct requirements, answering any questions that come back, Tyler is going to be able to help you um, really dial into the plan design that meets the needs of the group. So we're happy where we don't feel like we're the foremost expert to work with the experts, and that's why we've got Tyler here with you today. Just remember, if you're talking to a group about long-term care, you should probably be talking to them about their disability plan, right? At the end of the day, whether they have an existing plan or not, right? It's always worth an evaluation at the end of the day. So make the most of the conversation. Anybody else have anything for Tyler? Or Tyler, is there anything that you'd like to leave the group with as a takeaway?
No, I mean, I echo what Jason said. If you ever have questions about a prospect or, just how coverage works in general, we're always here as a resource. Buddy's been a great partner of ours. We're very fortunate to be working with them. And we're here to answer questions. I'm a disability geek. This is really all I do. So, happy to help people and educate people where I can.
Awesome. And I'll throw your email down in the chat real quick.
Perfect. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, appreciate the time. I'm sure we'll have you back on for more discussions, especially as we continue to get beyond getting our feet wet in disability. But appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you, Tyler, for giving us some education. Be well,
Sure.
and we will talk to you this time next week.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.